You're listening to Power Plug Radio, home of your throwback jams.
All right, and welcome to the Political Hour, January 21st. I'm Marielle Summers. I'm your host here, coming at you with the privilege each and every week to talk about the all too necessary world of politics. We always got a lot to talk about, y'all. Politics is always happening as the world turns. And I feel like a lot of times that statement is just even too big to quantify, right? You have like politics are happening in your neighborhood, and there are 110 neighborhoods, somewhat in St. Pete. This city is one of 24 municipalities, recognized cities in Pinellas County, in a state of 66 different counties, in a nation with 50 states, in a world with 265 different nations. So it's so many different things happening, always something to talk about. But you know what, we're here to talk about local politics, some of our state politics, and some of the national politics. But I really want to talk about this state of Florida today. The state legislature is in session. And politics is this thing where, little things it's like an ant building a huge ant mound. You see this big old thing. It took them a little minute. They did it grain by grain. And that's exactly how this nation is moving along. Looking at this state, the state legislature is in session. Florida is a great state. Make no mistake about it. We're privileged to live here because of the weather, our access to beaches, all of the fun amenities like Orlando and Miami and the different things that we get to do. But it is also population-wise one of the third largest state in the nation. Our gross domestic product here in the state of Florida, our GDP is our state makes more money than some small nations, many small nations. But make no mistake about it, it is Florida and its cousin Texas are the only states in this nation that are former Confederate states that have wealth of this size. Most of the other former Confederate states are on the lower end of gross domestic product as compared to some of the states up north, right? But here in Florida, we have wealth, and there's a certain culture that's been inherited. It's a certain culture that's been inherited. If you think about, 100 years ago, and the older you get, you realize that's not that long ago. That's like a lifetime ago, right? Those people were living just after the Civil War, just like we're living just after the Jim Crow and Civil Rights era. Like a bunch of people in my generation, we didn't live through that. We directly inherited the people who did, live through that. And so that's where they were 100 years ago. They were direct descendants of the people who actually lived through the time when this state said we would rather not be a part of the United States than ban slavery. That's what this state said. So there's a culture that lingers here. More on that in just a second. So the legislature's in session. That means right now, bills, all of the laws that the state of Florida passes. Each state has a state government. The state legislature is all of your state senators, your state representatives. They go to Tallahassee at the Capitol and they file bills and they write bills. And that is what's happening right now. It started January the 11th and they started filing, and 1,000 at least bills are going to be filed, but not all of them are going to be heard. But this is the time to get your appropriations in. What is appropriations? Appropriations is state funding. If you ever wonder, or you know somebody who writes grants, or you heard about grant writers and all of these things, those things are now at the state level. Get with your grant writing team over this next week. Find out who your representative is in your respective area. Here in South St. Pete, we're fortunate enough to be represented by Representative Michelle Rayner, who is running for U.S. Congress in the Florida House. And in the Florida Senate, we are represented by Senator Darrell Rouson, who, you know, year after year, I will talk about Senator Rouson and the state senators on another episode in our state reps, but he's a great advocate for mental health, for criminal justice reform, and for rehab for drug people who are affected by drugs. And he's very consistent and, like I said, pillar by pillar, moving things as he spends time in our Senate. So those would be the people if you're in South St. Pete that you would want to get your appropriations into if you want to try and apply for some type of state funding. But please go to the website and download the application and see, don't just go to these people with your application not, put together. Download it, read the information, get with somebody. There are plenty of organizations out here, and just, you can always inbox me with questions about that process. But all of the bills are certified by February 26th. And then it's up to the committees. The committees are meeting now. So the thing about it is you have the president of the Senate, you have the speaker of the House, right? The two different chambers of the legislature are our Senate and our House. And the speaker and the president determine how many different committees a bill has to go through before it goes to the floor for a vote. So let's just say I had a law that I wanted to propose called reparations, right? And I submitted this law. When the Speaker of the House comes along, this guy says, well, this has to go and pass through 5 committees, right? It can die in any committee, meaning the people always take a vote at the end of each committee meeting, and the yays outweigh the nays. Then the bill lives to see another day. If the nays have it, then the bill dies right there in the committee, right? But the Speaker, if he loves your bill, and a bill like Senate Bill House 48, the Individual Freedoms Bill, which we'll talk about here, comes along, he can say, oh, this is a great looking bill. We're going to put it on 2 committees, right? So instead of having to convince 5 separate groups of people, now you only have really 2 groups of people to convince, and your bill will go to the floor for a vote. Super important process there. The last committee meeting will meet by March the 1st, and the last day of session will be by March 11th. So the people you vote for, the people you put into power at the state level, they're doing all of their work right now. They do a lot of work throughout the year, meeting with people and, showing up at things and, that type of stuff. But as far as the lawmaking process, they are in that right now. And these laws usually go into effect July 1st of the same year. So we got some crazy legislation pending. If you've been paying attention to any type of news, you would have heard now about Senate Bill 148, which is the Individual Freedoms Bill. This bill is tailored. It's not, I read the bill's language. I haven't read all of the different pages of the bill, but the actual description of it is tailored to allow people who feel that the message that they're being taught is offensive to object to it. Whether it's being taught from a job, at school, we've had a lot of diversity and inclusion training required at jobs. We have people openly advocating to not teach critical race theory, which critical race theory wasn't going to be taught because it's a college, actually a law school course at that. But in response to that, you have this bill that is looking to not allow educators the certain discretion to teach Black history how they'd like. I mean, if we're being honest, these are going to be the outcomes for folks to not sit through diversity and inclusion training if they don't want to. It's going to make learning about history optional. The language in it is super ambiguous. Things like specified concepts that are contradictory to certain principles. All of this stuff is kind of detailed out in the bill, and the way that it's laid out is going to allow for those outcomes. Parents can sue, people can do what they want in terms of avoiding the actual knowledge about history. This is happening. It's only been given 2 committees. Remember what I said about the likelihood of something passing, the less committees that it has to pass through. And it already passed through 1. It had to go through the Education Committee and it had to go through the Rules Committee. So it's in the Rules Committee right now. But more importantly, it's endorsed by the governor. So Governor DeSantis has gone on a public media tirade about this bill. And anytime you have like the Senate and the House both lean heavily Republican, it's not even a race. It's not even a fight. If the Republicans are passionate about something, want something to pass, it's going to pass in the state of Florida. So when a Republican governor as popular as DeSantis is with the Republicans says that he wants a bill to pass, the bill is streamlined, in my opinion. Just like they did House Bill 1 last year. Remember, we were talking about the anti-protest bill, how they were trying to make the penalties increased for protesting and kind of discourage people from protesting. And well, what is our recourse? Just like the anti-protest bill, it can be struck down by federal courts. If the federal courts determine that something is unconstitutional, it can't hold up in state law. A state can't make a law that contradicts the Constitution. That's how the balance of power works in the nation. So yeah, he can pass this law. But it has to become a law first. They can't just come along and like intervene during the process, you know? It has to violate the law and by becoming a law. And so, you know, it could take a year from now before this doesn't hold up. But in the meantime, in between time, it's a deterrent. It's a deterrent for people. People in charter schools, perhaps, or people who want this type of training for their employees, but are afraid of being sued or afraid of being brought to court because this new law exists. That's gonna happen. So why are they doing this? And I'm spending some time on this because it's super, super important to, in my opinion, the Black community. We have to be aware that every time we think we're playing checkers, it's a game of chess. And this is a big piece that they're trying to move around in terms of how people are taught about history. Why are they doing this? History is ugly for them. White people did some atrocious things to the Black race in the last 100 years, in the last 50 years, in the last 30 years. Atrocious things. Yes, the American Indian has been discriminated against. Yes, the Hispanic population has also been people with disabilities. But Our struggle is not a shared struggle. No other race was enslaved on American soil. No other color has been stigmatized and legislated against. We're sitting in this beautiful studio with all of these big pictures of Martin Luther King all around marching with people. And when you think about what just took place, our race has never had any apologetic recognition in an honest way. It took for black people to start appreciating their own history and talking about their own culture and being vocal about the past for this to even become an issue. Because history has been whitewashed. History has been made to hide some of the truth. We talked about it during Black History Month. The GI Bill was not offered to black soldiers who were returning from Vietnam. Education in this state was segregated. Access to industries, access to jobs. People were lynched and terrorized for being successful. Not for being a menace, not for being a criminal, but if they had too much wealth and they were flaunting it in a way that white people didn't like. I mean, we have gone through some things at the hands of this nation, and we had just started taking the lid off that, and we had just started really talking about that. The vulnerable policies that separated people, that separated families, all the way up until you said you can have welfare, but there cannot be a man around, you know, or he's not allowed to be in there. And so our culture's been criminalized for decades now. And now we're at a time where folks don't want to portray, or they want to pretend like this didn't happen. Like it didn't go down like that. And so understand that this bill is not for us as black people. They've been successfully, in my opinion, in the 90s and 2000s, worked to get us to forget and stop talking about black history and stuff like that. This bill is to stop white people from learning and knowing and listening to the rhetoric that they have about white liberals. I mean, I'm listening to it. I'm dissecting it. They're saying, oh, these people hate them. They want to teach people to hate America. They're poisoning our children. These liberal colleges, this radical left. And you have to think about that. It's when white people realize what's going on, they come and they stand with us. You can always find a white face in the crowd at these marches during these times when we're out. Because when they realize what's going on, they stand with us. And they used to call these people hippies and communists back in the day. But now they call them radicals and leftists. And they don't want real history taught to people because it's nasty, open discrimination that led us to where we are today. Why so many disparities still exist between the neighborhoods and between the cultures and home ownership and wealth. All of these things are things that are inherited by some nasty, open discrimination. And they don't want their kids to be taught that, because then their kids are going to be like, oh no, we got to do something about it. We have to do something about it. So I don't know, we're coming up on a break. I'm going to take a break here in a little bit, but I want to round this off by saying what we as black people should know in these times. First of all, it's what the aim of such a nasty bill, because the bill is probably going to become law. That's why I'm spending so much time on it. That's why I wanted to talk about the process that a bill has to go through to become law and the majorities and things like that. Because when this happens, we can't be surprised. We got to be ready. We got to be ready. Many black people have heard firsthand stories or have had firsthand experiences of some open, blatant, rude, nasty discrimination. And racism and discrimination shouldn't be interchanged in this context. I'm not talking about racism, folks. I'm not talking about lynching and I'm talking about discrimination, not being picked when clearly being the most qualified, being called boy in public, never Mr. or Mrs., but having to call children ma'am and sir, or being referred to as a nigger. I mean, this was the way of life for people in the 60s and 70s. We're not even talking about 100 years ago. White only signs all up in your face. You can't even go shopping downtown inside certain stores. Not allowed to try clothes on and stuff. You got to buy the clothes and hope they fit. And crime just being open season on your people. Women can't report rape on white men and successfully take that to court. It was open season to the point where we produced a whole different colored people. All right. I'm just saying we know this stuff. But those experiences and that history, we have to teach this stuff in the face of these uncertain times. If not, your kids are not going to know who they are. You won't know who you are. If you didn't learn this yourself, understand that your kids are not going to be taught this in school. You have to be intentional about trying to learn something about where we came from. Not Africa, not the Civil War. I'm talking about people who were alive when white only was a thing. We got to embrace it, because society is showing you they're not only not going to tell you about it, they're going to make it illegal for official places to try and tell you about it. So that's something that we got to latch on to. We've overcome a lot of self-hate in recent decades. There are more black people accepting their natural hair, their natural skin color, embracing things that were previously deemed ghetto, standing up openly for black rights. We're conscious, we're waking up, but Senate Bill 148 is how they begin to strike back in 2022. It always starts with the courts. It always starts with the laws. It always starts with the government. But that's the beauty in living in a democracy. Voting works. Understand that it does. And we got to understand how the process works and so forth. So I'm going to talk a little bit more. I'm going to take a little break here and get off of my stoop here. But I had to talk about that, man. Senate Bill 148 is going to pass, man. There's some more state stuff I'm going to talk about when we come back. I wanted to spend some time on what the legislature is actually debating, some other bills outside of that, but always wanted to prioritize the knowledge that I think the people need first and foremost. So this is the Political Hour. I'm Marielle Summers. We're going to take a quick music break, and then we'll be right back.
You're listening to Power Plug Radio, home of your throwback jams. listening to Power Plug Radio, home of your throwback jams.
All right, so welcome back. This is the Political Hour. I'm your host, Marielle Summers, and we have talked about our state politics, mainly the Senate Bill 148, and I'm not going to get on it anymore, but if you missed that first part, Power Plug has 5 ways for you to listen. So make sure you go to your YouTube and you catch the beginning of this episode. A lot of important things about the new Senate Bill 148, where they are looking to change how we learn about history. Another bill to keep our eye on, Senate Bill 146. I think it's going to pass, the Fetal and Infant Mortality Reduction Bill. Now, this is our Florida legislators. They're masters at naming things to sound noble. Masters at it. So the Fetal and Infant Mortality Reduction Bill, it all sounds good, but this bill effectively bans abortions at about 12 weeks. It's only been given 2 committees. If you remember in the first part of the show, we were saying that bills that are given less committees are more favorable to pass, or are more favorable to hit the floor for a vote. And with the abortion laws passing in Texas, they are also kind of favorable to pass here. Like I said, Texas is like our cousin there. It's an 11-page bill with more implications than just the abortion. But regardless, even if it's just the abortion access is critical for safety and healthy communities. Make no mistake about it. When you look at low-income areas or areas where we're trying to bridge the gap, so to speak, right? We're trying to uplift people in these forgotten neighborhoods. We talked about that in the first part of the show a little bit, but history is trying to be erased in these other bills. And so now you have people in these communities that are underserved, that are historically excluded, that we are trying to help move forward. And like I said, bridge this gap. Limiting access to abortions will only make life harder for those living in those conditions. But beyond the low income argument, the fact of the matter is a woman's right to choose should be enough. It's not talked about enough. For too long in history, women have merely been property or equated to property, right? Kind of enslaved inside of a man's world. What their man did determined their lives. But here in the 21st century, we have produced the independent woman, right? Technology, life expectancy, all of the revolutions that we've made in health and culture have allowed for women to be able to survive and even become billionaires. Word to Oprah. With no knight in shining armor, right? Doesn't have to have 8 kids anymore to be of value as a human being. And women can still do that. There's no disrespect to the women who do that and make those decisions. But that's the point. Women should be able to do whatever they want. If they want to be homemakers, if they want to be children bearers and have 8 children, if they don't want to have any children. The world needs more than anything good humans and love. Period. We need good humans. We don't need good baby bearers and good patriarch. We need good humans and we need love in this world. So, and make no mistake about it, people are still going to get pregnant, right? Like, I'm not advocating for the stopping of human creation. People are still going to make babies. But the fact of the matter is we have to let people live and find true happiness. And by limiting abortion access, I think women bear an an unfair burden in society. They have to, grow a whole human being and produce that human being to the world. So look out for that. That's Senate Bill 146 that I think is going to be favorable in passing. We got some other fun bills. Senate Bill 190, the Controlled Substance Bill. Pay attention to that. It's going to provide stricter penalties for crimes when controlled substances are 1,000 feet within the vicinity. Okay. More people are going to have harsher and longer penalties if Senate Bill 190 passes. So just understand how the law is developing. Senate Bill 96, the Emergency Preparedness Fund. It's kind of been seen as controversial because it is giving billions of dollars to the governor to use at his discretion. Let's say DeSantis runs again for re-election, which we're electing a governor. Y'all have to wake up. But this year in November, we're going to elect a governor. And DeSantis has a lot of support in this former Confederate state. So anyhow, it gives the billions to DeSantis, whether he uses that money for our hurricane response or in some responsible way. It essentially, though, emboldens him, empowers him to not rely on the federal government or feel, because the federal government has very limited control over the states. Remember, last week we talked about the 10th Amendment and states' rights and so forth. And so when the federal government imposes a new law or suggests a new way of doing things, a lot of ways they are able to get these things passed. It's referred to as the power of the purse strings, right? They say we'll withhold 5% or 10% of this type of budget if you don't comply. Well, if the governor, according to Senate Bill 96, has this emergency preparedness fund that he can activate at his discretion, it kind of gives him a little bit more autonomy to move. So we'll pay attention to that. Another fun bill that I've seen, Senate Bill 176, the clothing optional beaches. Naked beaches are coming to Florida. This was a Republican sponsored bill, and I think it's going to pass. But that's just the Senate. That's just the things that are going on in the Senate. There's a lot going on in the House as well. And we'll touch on some of those. Like I said, this legislative session is happening now. It's happening from January until May. They are in session now. If you need to get an appropriation in, we talked about that in the first part of the show. An appropriation is simply state funding. So if you've been trying to get state dollars, now's the time. Get on the website, download the application, find out who your representative is, get your application in to try and get some state funding for your initiative. And they will do that. I don't know the deadline for it, but I know all bills are entered by the 26th of February and the session is over by March 11th. So we'll keep paying attention. A lot of them overlap because both houses have to pass the same bill anyways. That's it on the state side. On the local side of things, there are just two things I want to cover real quick. How are we doing on time? Let me look. 46. Okay, we got a little bit of time. Okay, just real quick. This past week, we had the MLK celebrations. We've had some amazing celebrations here. We had more than 70 vendors at Gibbs High School on Saturday. We had the MLK Dream Big weekend of things, which they did a kind of outdoor festival right on the water on Saturday. Big old tent, a lot of things for the kids. They did the Battle of the Bands. They did a gospel choir concert, and they did the parade on Monday. The parade also happened. And so a lot happened, and my observations are, we need better, in my opinion, better living networks in this city for increased participation and increased attendance. We have great events, great offerings. This city really does for our community, for the Black community. We really do. But advertising in this city happens via word of mouth. And we have to understand 9th Street had no commercials, had no flyers, but the attendance was crazy. Folks just knew to come, right? And so what I'm saying is we have to understand how the water is moving in our community and work it to our advantage. We have to utilize the same energy that makes people come out to a 9th Street or makes our community respond in any way, and apply that to our power networks. We have a lot of powerful people in the city of St. Petersburg, from our mayor to our city council members, on our county commission and our school board. We have in the private sector those who have the money, those who have the business experience, the acumen. We have that. That's something we currently possess. But the ability to make it all work in a way that word of mouth and connected networks is something that we can leverage off, is something we have not mastered yet. And I think that's our golden goal if we chase after that. 9th Street, I was just pleased with the fact that the city, the police, let 9th Street be 9th Street. I worked with two people. I worked on that day, and I was with two people who had never been on 9th Street. It was their first time, and the experience was like, it's like a once in a life. It's like a lifetime remembering experience for these people, explaining it to me. And it's because, in my opinion, the Black culture is so pure. It's so rich. It's so fun. It's so raw. The police were chill. The city was cooperative. So I think the major respect goes to the constant advocates who have been meeting with the police and meeting with the city for years now, trying to find some solution to 9th Street. If you remember, maybe 2 years ago they blocked off all the streets. Nobody was able to get down there. It hurts a lot of people economically who make a lot of money, who depend on that day to produce them a lot of income. Well, if you were selling food out there, if you were selling drinks out there, if you were selling stickers out there, if you were giving stuff away, you had just the great experience. And so thanks to the mayor, thanks to the city, thanks to the police for letting us have that cultural experience that 9th Street is. The other local news I'll touch on real quick, because we're going to get out of here real quick. The Major League Baseball said no to the sister city concept. Now, if you remember, I ran for city council this past election cycle, and I even got picked up by a PAC because of my position on the Rays, which was, we want the Rays here full time. See, we're not, the whole solution was we're going to share the city with Montreal, or we're going to share the team with Montreal, and they'd be here for spring training and some of the games, and then they go to Montreal. Well, first of all, we're redeveloping the Trop, which is some of the country's, or the city's, most valuable land. This is going to be one of the most valuable redevelopments that happens in the city of St. Petersburg, at least in the next 2 or 3 decades, because of the mass and the location. Why would taxpayers fund a stadium for a part-time team? That didn't even make sense to me. It's not good for taxpayers. It's not a good use of the land. And so the Major League Baseball, they went ahead and solved that problem and undercut that by saying, look, that's not going to work. So now that the Rays cannot do that, the pressure's on. We have to figure out what's going to happen with the Rays here in our city. Now, gentrification's real. It's happening, folks. You see it all the time with new high rises, with new apartments and new buildings being built at a rate that is not conducive or reflective to the average median income in those areas. Not citywide, but in those areas. People are being priced out left and right. So, and let's not talk about, okay, I-375, right? That is the interstate when you're getting off of it that comes off right by the church. It puts you right on 4th Street if you ride it all the way down, right? But it is the interstate that many people would argue was embedded to cut off the black community back in the 70s from the downtown area. It's a lot of talks about Biden and the infrastructure plan and being able to either bring that to grade, which means bring it to the same ground level as it does that little dip thing, or to add more access roads. There was a lot of talk about that. But if you drive down there, you'll see that they're planting new trees, new concrete structures, new decoration. Without a doubt, that's costing hundreds of thousands of dollars. None of this, it contradicts all of the public representation of what they told us they want to do with that stretch of land. So now, to me, the pressure is on the developers, the Rays, and the city government to kind of reach an agreement. The Rays have their own inner fighting going on. Their guy, Stu Sternberg, they're suing. The partners are suing each other. The Rays don't know what they want to do. The city government, we have a new mayor and a new city council. So whether or not the plans that the previous mayor selected stand are also on the table. In Midtown, the pick by the last mayor, they're vulnerable because he picked them in the last month of his administration. And so they're kind of on ice. They can't really move forward with any of their plans until the city and the Rays come to an agreement. So this is what's happening right here in our backyard. Make sure that you pay attention. If you missed the first part of the show, go to YouTube. We talked about Senate Bill 148 and the implications of changing education and what that's going to mean to our communities, to the white children who need to learn this information to make us a more holistic society. We talked about that in depth. We talked about some of the other legislation that is looming in our Republican leaning state and how detrimental these things can be. But this is the stuff that's happening in our backyard. So, pay attention to what's going to happen with this Rays deal. And I think we are running out of time. We're running out of time, folks. So this is the Political Hour. You're listening to it on Power Plug Radio. Subscribe to it on YouTube. Such great programming throughout the week. But I'm Marielle Summers. I have the privilege of coming every Friday to talk to you about our politics that are ever changing, always happening. So tune in, man. Tune in next week, and we'll be back.
You're listening to Power Plug Radio, home of your throwback jams.